regards to the announcement from BCI, do you think that there could be a fair judgment from the grand jury after that announcement?
Well, the Attorney General DeWine actually raises significant issues about whether the system is already, the process is already somewhat tainted. What I mean by that, what was supposed to happen is that they were supposed to, they being the Attorney General's office and BCI, was supposed to give a written report to County Prosecutor McGinty, and he was supposed to, at that point, quietly review everything and determine what type of case he would take to the grand jury. By AG DeWine speaking out, by Prosecutor McGinty being involved with that, it raises the question of whether McGinty is neutral. And so I think questions are raised. That's why myself and a number of folks have called on for him to appoint a special prosecutor. And for me, I had to say that once he got involved with that news conference. So it does raise a question for the criminal review. You know, there's administrative review that is being done. But as far as criminal, there is a question of raising of whether it's tainted or not.
So the proper procedure would have been for them to do what? Once they gathered their information?
Well, they were invited initially, they being Attorney General DeWine. They had to come in by invitation. So the East Cleveland Police Department invited them, along with the Sheriff Department. Of course, the shooting after the chase, where Mr. Russell and Ms. Williams were killed, occurred actually in East Cleveland, though it started in Cleveland. So East Cleveland had the jurisdiction of reviewing the criminal case. And because of their lack of certain resources, they asked for help from BCI. Okay. And what's supposed to have happened is that the BCI and the Attorney General's office are supposed to do the interviews, look at the forensics, come up with the facts in a written report, and then turn that over to the county prosecutor, because he is the one who deals with criminal charges, if there are any. But Attorney General DeWine went one step further and decided to give us his opinion about the system and what have you, which I believe is premature. If we wanted his opinion, it would be after charges are filed or not filed, and after the administrative review is completed. Then City Council looks at all of it, and at that point we could have brought Attorney General DeWine, should we chose to do it, to give us his opinion. But it was premature. It was really grandstanding, as far as I'm concerned, and it didn't add to the debate at all from the standpoint of the process. It did provide a lot for the press to cover, but in the end, this is supposed to be a neutral process until all the facts are in. Okay.
Basically, when Attorney General DeWine did his press event, he basically gave out information that should not have been given, would you say?
Well, first of all, he did two things. He provided the facts, which meant he did interviews with the police officers involved in the chase and involved with the shooting, and provided that. He also talked about the timeline of what happened and when it happened, and he talked about the results of the test of whether there was gun residue. Now, those are facts, and his responsibility was to do that in a report to the Attorney General, and he did that, but he took it one step further and released it to the public, for the public and the media to begin to look at what he had, which is only part of the entire investigation that Prosecutor McGinty has to look at. But by putting it out in the public this early, it creates already this unnecessary dialogue, because we have to wait for the criminal justice system to work its way through. Prosecutor McGinty has to decide what, if any, he's going to take to the grand jury. And because it's potentially explosive, the idea of criminally charging a police officer. In this case, is there anything criminally that occurred during the shooting at the end that killed Mr. Russell and Ms. Williams? Some folks will say to you, because of the volume of bullets, because of the way it happened, many of them believing there was a gun when there wasn't a gun, some saying they saw a gun when they actually now are saying they didn't see a gun, the way they didn't go about the proper procedures when it came to the chase. When you add all that up, do you really need to have that dialogue now before Prosecutor McGinty or a special prosecutor finish his work? I think not. And under the normal circumstances, silence is supposed to be the best approach until we get to that question. Now, we do have the silence on the other side. I want to really say that. Chief Michael McGrath and Mayor Frank Jackson have made it clear that they are going to stay neutral, that they are going to stay quiet, that they're going to go through the administrative review and look at every police officer's role in the chase and in the use of deadly force. And they will determine whether there was administrative rules. They don't do the criminal. That's the prosecutor. They do the administrative rules. And that means if they find violations of the rules, whether the police did not seek permission, for example, to go into the chase, whether they didn't talk to the supervisor or whatever reason, if they violated, then they have to be disciplined. And discipline can be a one-day suspension all the way up to being fired. And so they don't want to taint that process. So they did not respond to the accusations by AG DeWine, such as what he said about Chief McGrath's leadership, which I thought was a cheap shot, and I had to speak out against that. But to Chief McGrath's benefit, he kept it professional. He didn't respond, and Mayor Jackson stayed quiet because they know in the end they have to make some significant decisions of discipline, possibly. And I give them credit. That process is not tainted because they kept professionally focused. The other, because of DeWine and because of McGinty, there may be problems.
Speaking about as far as with McGinty,
Okay.
with him standing right there during that process, do you feel like at that point should something have been done? Could he have being a prosecutor, you would think that he would know that he's given up too much information to the public.
It's a judgment call. First of all, AG DeWine would not have been able to do that under his responsibilities under the law. He has to be invited in. Part of his job duty statewide is to advise county prosecutors. So if Prosecutor McGinty did not want the report to be released, it could not have been released because the AG has to follow what the local prosecutor says. So the AG McGinty obviously signed off on it. Now maybe it's hard for someone to say no to the AG of the state, the Attorney General. So, but the bottom line is that not only did he say yes to releasing the information, he being Prosecutor McGinty, but he actually participated in the news conference. But so by him standing up there and by him making certain statements like Mr. Russell and Ms. Williams provoked the police, and it begins to wonder whether his objectivity that's needed has become more subjectivity. And that's where he's created an unnecessary concern about the fairness of his process. Now, he has been quiet ever since the news conference, even though AG DeWine has been on a speaking tour through the media. I will give credit that the prosecutor did not say anything since that news conference. He probably because he figured out he can't do more, he needs to do his job quietly until he comes out with it.
And the reason why we did not, normally if it would have happened in our home here in Cleveland, we would have done the criminal and the administrative.
We would have done the criminal investigation,
right,
but then we would have to turn it over to McGinty. Whereas our administration, we do the investigation and then we do the discipline. When it comes to felony consideration, it is strictly county prosecutor who makes the determination of whether felony charges are assessed. Now, we have the ability through our city prosecutor to do misdemeanor charges. So if these were misdemeanor, then we would turn it over to our city prosecutor. But because these are potentially, you're talking about manslaughter, or murder, or whatever you want to call it, negligent homicide, because all of that are felony levels, that goes to the county prosecutor. The city prosecutor doesn't do anything when it comes to felony. That's why when you see TV a lot of times, you'll see someone go in front of a municipal judge and they say they're binding them over. What that means is that the municipal judge will initially hear a case involving a felony, potential felony, but then after they hear it and the guy or lady gives their either they're guilty, not guilty, no contest plea, then they shift it over to the county system. And not a lot of people recognize that no matter if a deadly force occurs in Cleveland, the county prosecutor is the one who decides whether a police officer is going to be charged or not be charged. But we do the investigation.
Right. But you know what? One thing that sort of puzzles me is why do you think that all this is falling on the chief and the mayor? Like, why wouldn't people see that it is, as you said, tainted, you know, from that press conference? It was so obvious.
Well, the chief was brought into it. The questioning of the chief's leadership was actually brought in by the Attorney General DeWine, because his assessment was that there was a total systematic breakdown, and the persons over the system are the leadership, and that is the chief and director, Marty Flask, and the mayor. The problem with that assessment is that we all disagree with it. We feel that the system is there because there are clear procedures and processes and procedures, but it's up to the individuals within the system to adhere to them. So when they violate rules and regulations, that's when they are assessed, just like anybody in the city, for example, are assessed from a disciplinary standpoint. Mike DeWine went too far. He gave opinion when it was premature, and it's an opinion that we don't agree with. Now, we do believe that in the end, City Council will look at it all. When the administration discipline is done, when the decision about whether criminal charges are filed or not are at least charged or not charged, we will look at the system and what happened, and we will work to fix if there's individual flaws.